And good afternoon, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. I am your host, Tony Defeo, and thank you for joining me on this fine Saturday afternoon. And as always, I encourage you to please subscribe to our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel and also like the page where we bring you various podcasts each and every day. 7 days a week we have podcasts. There's so many to choose from, and you can also find them on the various podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio. So please check that out. And please check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website where we bring you breaking news every day, commentary, film breakdown. It is your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. So I would say welcome to everybody in the live chat, but there they are. There's Daniel, Noriega, Alex Flores. Thanks for joining me. Excuse me. So, as always, I want to talk about a number of different topics in today's show, and starting with last Sunday's 26-21 victory over the Broncos at Heinz Field. I'm not saying anything new here, but it was kind of sloppy. There were 10 penalties. The Steelers had several chances to put that game away, including late in the first half after Joe Hayden's interception, set them up at the 11-yard line, and they had to settle for a field goal after failing to pick up a first down on 3rd and 1. And then early in the second half, after they got the second half kickoff, Ray McLeod returned it to midfield, and 3 plays later, Ben Roethlisberger threw an interception, and that combined with the first half. The failure to score at the end of the failure to score a touchdown at the end of the first half, I should say, that really turned the momentum, and the Broncos scored 11 unanswered points to make it 17-14. And the Steelers, to their credit, they bounced right back. Moments later, Ben found Deontay Johnson on, I think it was a 28-yard touchdown pass. It was vintage Ben. He sprinted to his right and found Johnson in the back of the end zone, who made a nice little diving catch. It was a little bit behind him, behind the receiver, but after a year off, I'm willing to forgive that. And it was a great play by Johnson. Give Johnson credit for staying with the ball and making the play there. And then 4 plays later, Sam Martin, the Steelers forced a 3 and out, and Sam Martin fumbled the snap on the punt, the Broncos punter, and it rolled out of the back of the end zone for a safety. So it's looking like at that moment, with about 10 minutes to go in the game, it's looking like the Steelers have the game under wraps, right? They get the ball at midfield after the free kick. And what happens? 1 play later, Benny Snell, the guy that on this show, I gave a huge vote of confidence to. I said he should be the starter. And he let me down. He let all the Steeler fans down. He fumbled, and the Broncos took advantage of that, made it 26-21, and what looked like a blowout, several times during that game, which should have been a blowout, turned into a nail biter, and the Steelers defense had to hold at the end. Terrell Edmonds got a sack of backup quarterback Jeff Driscoll on 4th down to turn the ball over on downs, and the Steelers ran out the clock. James Conner, to his credit, he struggled the week before. I was critical of him after his week 1 performance, and the fact that he was yet again injured, he bounced back. He didn't have a great game overall. He was pretty pedestrian with his first 12 or 13 carries of that game. But when they needed to put the game away, he looked strong. And on 2nd and 5, he got a nice little kick out block by Derek Watt, the fullback, and sprinted 59 yards, and that was it. So it was sloppy, but it was a win, and a win is a win, as they say, especially early in the year, and especially without any preseason games. And by the way, I want to say hi to some more people in the live chat. Team Money, my friend Terry, Ezra, Matthew, Fortuna, Nathaniel Zarati. So thanks everybody for joining me. But where was I? Oh yes, 2-0 is 2-0, and they didn't have preseason, so you can kind of forgive that. But we've seen this a lot with this team, and I'd say the last 5 or 10 years with having the chance to put the opponent away and making either committing a stupid penalty or a ill-timed turnover. And next thing you know, it's a nail biter. So I don't know. I'm not trying to be too critical, but I think it's lucky that the Steelers were playing one of the lesser teams in the league last week in the Broncos. I mean, the Broncos aren't horrible, but I think if the Steelers were facing another team, they may have not gotten away with some of their mistakes last week. But again, a win is a win, and 2-0 is a heck of a lot better than 0-2, which is where they were last year at this time. In fact, last year they were 0-3 and then 1-4. So, take the 2-0 record and learn from it and keep moving forward, I guess. Now let's talk about the good parts of last week's game, starting with T.J. Watt, who had 2.5 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, AFC Defensive Player of the Week. And I think the most remarkable thing about T.J. Watt's performance is it kind of went under the radar for me. I mean, obviously not for the National Football League since he was named AFC Defensive Player of the Week, but he's dare I say he's reached Antonio Brown territory, meaning he could have when he has a really great game, it's just it's another great game by TJ Watt. Remember when Antonio Brown week after week he would get 10 catches for 120, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns, make some acrobatic plays on the sideline, save the game at the end. And people were just so used to it they barely even mentioned it in some articles. They didn't want to talk about other contributors like Juju Smith-Schuster or James Conner or somebody along the offensive line. It's just we just got so used to Antonio Brown and what he could do for the team, and that's where TJ Watt is now. I mean, he's arguably the best defensive player in the NFL right now, and as I said before, if you had to do the 2017 draft all over again, it's probably Patrick Mahomes number 1 and TJ Watt number 2. I mean, name somebody else you could throw in there, but either way, he certainly wouldn't have lasted to the 30th pick. That's for sure. So I think I predicted, a lot of people have predicted that TJ Watt has a Defensive Player of the Year award in his future, and it might be as soon as this year. So, but I also wanted to again give credit to Bud Dupree, who was once again, just like in week 1, very disruptive. In week 2, I thought he played a great game. It didn't show up in the stat line, but he caused another turnover. He was helped out by T.J. Watt, who flushed Drew Lock out of the pocket and flushed him right into Bud Dupree, who tackled him, knocked the ball loose. Mike Hilton recovered, and it knocked Drew Lock out of the game. So I realize for whatever reason, Bud Dupree has his critics, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that he got after a slowish start, certainly a slow start for a first-round pick over his first 4 years. He showed some promise, and there was certainly a lot of excitement about him coming into after his first 2 seasons, 2015, 2016. He had some injury issues, but the feeling was coming into 2017 that the sky was the limit for him, and he did okay in 2017 and 2018, but certainly not where the level that he's playing right now. And I was reading an article on Behind the Steel Curtain the other day, applauding, I think it was by Michael Beck, and his opinion that Dupree might be the Steelers' best defensive player right now. And as much as I just talked about T.J. Watt, I think that Bud Dupree, I mean, you can make a case that if the NFL Defensive Player of the Year voting took place right now, that Bud Dupree would certainly get some votes. That's how well he's playing right now. But people were saying, and I've heard it not just on Behind the Steel Curtain, but I've heard a lot of people say this. Well, he's only benefiting from T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward and Tuitt, and he's just benefiting from their presence, and he's benefiting from switching positions. He's on the weak side now. Okay, maybe both of those are true, but maybe those guys, as far as the first part, maybe T.J. Watt and Hayward and those guys are also benefiting from Bud Dupree and his exceptional play, because he looks like he's being shot out of a rocket every time he goes to rush the quarterback. He just looks he looks like the best athlete on the defense right now. He just looks to be incredible shape, and it's a testament to him. So that's the first part. The second part is, so what if he switched positions? He found a position that suits him best, and guess what? James Harrison, Joey Porter, Greg Lloyd, they all played the same position. So you're saying that they only benefited from the position that they played? No, they were just great players. So again, I don't know what it is about Bud, but some people, they've always had it out for him. I mean, he was never really a bust as far as I'm concerned. Those first 4 years, he didn't get off to the kind of start you wanted for a first round pick, but he came into 2019 with 20 career sacks, which isn't a bust for a first round pick. If you want to talk about busts, Aaron Jones was a bust. Huey Richardson was cut the second year, first round pick. Bill Cowher asked in training camp, his first training camp in 1992, he asked somebody, is it okay if I cut a first round pick? And of course he did. He cut him. Even Ziggy Hood, I like Ziggy Hood. He was an okay player, but for a first round pick, he didn't do a whole heck of a lot. So I think Bud certainly came into 2019 more accomplished than any of those players. So he was not Jarvis Jones, another one. So certainly wasn't a bust. And I think it's just a credit that he went out and did the work in the offseason to get himself to the level that he could be the player that obviously you have to credit Keith Butler for coaching him up, but it's ultimately the credit goes to Bud Dupree for being the player that he is. And again, even with his great plays, there's some people that just have it out for him. I time and time again, you see he fat shamed Mark Cabali last year, and that wasn't a good look for Bud Dupree. So people bring that up all the time. They talk about how Bud was the ringleader when it was finally determined that Le'Veon Bell wasn't going to report to the team 2 years ago. He led the little circus of raiding his locker, but I thought that was more tongue in cheek, and they were just giving him a hard time. Then I took it as being malicious, but people bring that up occasionally. They talk about how Bud called out James Harrison when he was cut 3 years ago for his behavior, and even though Marquise Pouncey did the same thing, actually he was more critical of James Harrison. For some reason, people give Dupree a hard time for that. But anyway, I don't want to go on a rant about Bud Dupree. That was more I started off talking about TJ Watt, and I just switched it right over to Bud Dupree because I have a soft spot for Bud because I want to see every Steeler player do well, especially if people seem to be unusually critical of them, and that seems to be the case with Bud Dupree. I could see guys like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and even Ben Roethlisberger and Juju Smith-Schuster, high-profile players. People are going to always find a way to find fault with those kind of players, but Bud Dupree's sort of an under the radar kind of guy. There are some people that really take things personally with him, like when he filed the grievance with the union, the NFLPA, to try to be designated a defensive end, so he could get paid a couple million more. People act like he was taking money off of them. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out to Bud, and for as well as TJ Watt's doing, and he is, I think he's the best defensive player in the NFL right now. I think those two are more of a package deal than we're willing to admit. I think they're the two best outside linebackers in the NFL today, and even Mike Tomlin kind of alluded to it the other day when he was talking about Watt and how he gets himself ready during practice and who he interacts with, and Tomlin said the only person he ever really talks to is Dupree. So I think those two realize how important they are to each other. So I think the sky's the limit for the two of them this year, as far as what they accomplished, what they can accomplish. Last year, Watt had 14.5 sacks. Dupree had 11.5. I think they can both top those numbers this year the way they're going. I mean, Dupree's gotten off to a slow start with the sacks, but I think even if he doesn't get 11.5, I think he's going to have at least as good, if not a better year than he did last year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the two of those continue to do this year. And I want to say hello to Corey, Just Me, Kathy Ford. Thank you for joining the live chat. And some more good things I wanted to talk about. Chase Claypool. What about him, folks? What a great start to his career, right? I mean, my goodness. You saw the athleticism on display in the first game when he made that sideline catch diving out of bounds. maintaining possession all the way to the ground. And that was, the combat catch was something he was known for in college. And then, of course, the 84-yard touchdown catch and run against the Broncos last week when they were silly enough to play man-to-man coverage against him. That was Ben Roethlisberger loves that. Chris Collinsworth said it many times. There's nobody that loves that one-on-one coverage more than Big Ben. And when he sees it, he always tries to take a shot. And he took a shot there, and it was fantastic. It was everything you could have possibly dreamed of if you're a Steeler fan. What he did on that play with the ability to break open deep and to take it all the way. I mean, that's a legitimate deep threat speed there on that play. So I think obviously he's going to be worked more and more into the offense, I would imagine, over the next several weeks, because I think he is a weapon, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they continue to incorporate him into the offense in the coming weeks. But the thing that really impressed me about Chase Claypool was, and my uncle noticed too, who I watched the game with on Sunday, is how many times he got downfield on kickoffs and punts. He was the first one down there often. I think he made 3 tackles, a solo tackle, and that's what he was known for coming out of Notre Dame. So maybe that's not much of a shock, but I think it shows his character and his drive and determination and how willing he is to be a team player to be the first one down there. And it kind of reminded me of Hines Ward. His first couple of years, he played special teams, and Hines Ward, unlike Chase Claypool, Hines Ward did not have the expectations coming in that Chase Claypool did. Hines Ward was basically, he was a 3rd round pick out of Georgia, and I'm sure he was expected to contribute, but I don't think anybody expected that he would be arguably the all-time best receiver in team history. But Hines Ward did a lot of that, the tough work early on, and that's what impressed me the most, I think, about Claypool. Yeah, he's a great weapon on offense. At least he looks that way so far. But his willingness to get down there and be a special teams demon, that's really shown me something. And if he keeps playing, unfortunately, if he keeps playing offense the way or receiver the way he has over the first couple of weeks, he probably won't be on coverage teams much longer. So I guess we might enjoy that while we can for all you special teams freaks out there. So I think more good things are to come for Chase Claypool, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. And one more thing I wanted to talk about before I get on to some other things about last week's game is actually I'm going to keep talking about last week's game, but the next thing I wanted to talk about is Big Ben and the fact that he looked like if there were any doubts after week 1, I think those doubts were put to rest last week with, he completed 29 of 41 passes for 311 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had that pick, but that's he's going to throw a pick every now and then. That's Big Ben. But if you were surprised that he threw 41 times in his second start, I wasn't. I kind of figured, as much as I talked about balance during the offseason, I kind of figured if Ben was feeling good, he was gonna air it out as much as possible. That's what he does. That's what a lot of quarterbacks of his stature do. And I think as long as Ben's around and feeling good, he's always gonna be a prolific passer. I think the days of Big Ben going 16 to 20 for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, that kind of efficiency that you saw from him early in his career, I think those days are pretty much over. I think he wants to pass the ball, and I think the same thing could be said for the likes of Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, those older established quarterbacks who are clearly the alpha males of their teams. They're going to want to have the ball in their hands as much as possible. So I wasn't surprised by that. I think when people talk about balance, I think they think, well, you have to throw it 20 times and run it 20 times. But I think in modern day modern football, when people talk about balance, I think a better way to look at it is being effective at both running and passing the ball. And I think if the Steelers can achieve that, if they can be efficient with their ground game, even if they're not rushing it 30, 35 times a game, if they can be efficient with the 15 or 20 times that they do run the ball, I think that's all you can ask for, because they're going to sling it. Ben's going to sling it. As long as he's here and feeling good, he's gonna want to pass it 35, 40 times a game. So, continuing with last week's game, I have to talk about my favorite part, and that's Kevin Dotson. Absolutely. He was my favorite pick coming out of college, the 4th-round pick out of Louisiana. He was a 4-year starter. He had to be thrown in there at right guard because of, number one, the training camp injury suffered by David DeCastro that kept him out of the first 2 games, and number 2, the week 1 pectoral injury suffered by Stefan Wisniewski that forced him out of last week's game and forced him onto the IR. So Kevin Dotson had to go in with no preseason action whatsoever under his belt. And what did he do? He did basically a perfect job. I mean, from what I read, he had the Steelers, as I mentioned, they passed a lot. All in all, they dropped back to Ben dropped back to pass 43 times, and in those 43, Dotson allowed 0 pressure. So I know that I don't know. I'm not an expert on offensive line play, but I know that's pretty darn good. And listening to the likes of Jeffrey Benedict, behind the steel curtain zone, Jeffrey Benedict, he was the lead blocker on the James Conner touchdown early in the game. I think it was 1-yard touchdown. He took out 2 or 3 guys, and Jeffrey was gushing about Kevin Dotson all week. And he obviously, I think you saw the I think they've been published the film breakdown of his play, and I believe he was graded the highest lineman or the highest interior lineman by Pro Football Focus last week. So I mean, kudos to Kevin Dotson for an outstanding job, and it had to be a high pressure situation for him. His first career start in his second career game. I mean, my goodness, filling in for a perennial Pro Bowler, no less, and to have the kind of game that he did. Ben Roethlisberger gave him the game ball afterwards, and heck, that tells you all you need to know about how much his performance was appreciated last week. I mean, kudos to him, but kudos to Shaun Cerrett too. Kudos to Shaun Cerrett for getting him ready and coaching him up. And yes, Dotson was probably underdrafted. I think we can all agree on that. I think that was the sentiment after the draft, because this guy was as I've mentioned before, as we've all mentioned before, Dotson was a decorated college player. He started for 4 straight years, and I just want to get this up there real quick. If you're listening at home, this is from Sir Bradley. Amazing film breakdown by Jeffrey. Indeed, it was. He knows his stuff, and again, he was gushing about Dotson's play. So kudos to Dotson, kudos to Jeffrey Benedict, and again, kudos. Where was I? Yes, kudos to Shaun Cerrett. Dotson was perhaps underdrafted, but he was still a rookie, and he was still thrown into a tough situation, and he had to be prepared, and he certainly was. So you have to give credit to Shaun Cerrett, not only for that, but for coaching up the likes of Zach Banner, who was in a big battle with Chuks Okorafor for that right tackle spot in training camp. And as we've talked about many times, it was apparently a very good and very close battle, and Banner just barely got the nod. So he coached Banner up. He talked, if you remember the podcast that Banner did with Behind the Steel Curtain a couple months ago, he mentioned the coaching that he got once he came here. You know, he started his career, I think, with the Colts, and then he was with the Browns after that, and then he came to Pittsburgh. And he said the coaching that he got here in 2018, back then it was Mike Munchak was the offensive line coach, and Shaun Cerrett was his assistant. And the coaching they gave him made him a better lineman. So, you know, people were worried about Mike Munchak's departure last year when he went to Denver. And by the way, Munchak, my theory, or I talked about Munchak, his lines getting better the longer he's with the team, and getting better at pass protection and not allowing many sacks. Well, last week the Steelers had 7, so I think Mike Munchak has a little bit more work to do. But anyway, people were worried about Munchak's departure, and they questioned the struggles of the line last year. But I think that was more to do, as I've mentioned several times, that had more to do with the quarterback play and the fact that opposing defenses could not respect the passing game, and they crowded the line, and that was a difficult situation for the offensive line to deal with last year. But in terms of actual coaching, Cerrett, he learned he mentored under Munchak for several years, and people they talked highly of him before Munchak even left. So it isn't like trying to Munchak is a Hall of Fame offensive lineman, so it's not like trying to he could probably never coach somebody to be a Hall of Famer, but what a coach's job is to get the most out of a player that he can, whether it's a high pedigree player or a undrafted free agent. And of course, Munchak was very good at that. And I can't see why he couldn't pass that knowledge along to somebody who was willing to learn. And if Shawn Cerrett was already a talented coach, I'm sure he was willing and able to learn everything he could from Mike Munchak. So why couldn't he be a sponge, so to speak, and absorb everything that perhaps the greatest offensive line coach of our generation had to tell him? So I think we're it's not like Munchak had to teach Shawn Cerrett how to be a Hall of Fame. That's actually a better analogy than what I just said. It's not like he had to teach him to be a Hall of Fame offensive lineman. He just had to teach him to be a very good offensive line coach. And I think I'm confident that Shawn Cerrett's going to continue to do a great job based on the performance of guys like Kevin Dotson and Chuks Okorafor and Zach Banner, who have all done great so far as starters. It was Okorafor's 5th start last week, and you've never heard anything bad about any of his 5 starts up to this point in his career. So I think that speaks well for not only for those guys, but for the coaching that they receive, because it was important that they found a true successor to Munchak, and I think that they did in Cerrett. So that brings me to my next point, and that is the youth movement that's, I think, currently taking place along the offensive line. I think that's a question that gets asked often is, about the Steelers offensive line is its age. And everybody on the line, with the exception of, or coming into the season, everybody along the line, with the exception of Matt Feiler, they were getting up there in age. At Villanueva, Pouncey, DeCastro, and Ramon Foster, they were all over the age of 30. Well, Ramon retired, and that left Feiler as the only guy under the age of 30. But if you look at how things are progressing now with that line, I mentioned Banner and Okorafor, and I realized Banner suffered the season-ending ACL tear in week 1, but he did a lot up to that point to turn himself into a starting right tackle in the NFL. And obviously, I'm no doctor, but I think it's probably a little easier for a lineman to come back from an ACL tear than a running back or a receiver or somebody that relies on speed. I realize that these guys they rely on their, they have to be agile out there and move around in space and everything. But I think it's probably a little easier for a lineman to recover from that. So I have all the confidence in the world that Banner will be back, provided he keeps his weight down and he rehabs religiously, which I have no doubt that he will. I think he can come back next year and be your starting right tackle, and maybe Chuks Okorafor is your starting left tackle, because I think Villanueva, I think his time here is coming to an end. They have to make a lot of tough decisions, and again, he's over the age of 30. He's making he's on a pretty decent contract right now. I don't know when it runs out, but I know he signed a pretty decent deal not long ago, a few years ago. So they're probably going to have to move on from him, and Okorafor could be your left tackle. And Kevin Dotson, Matt Feiler, they're also in the mix as far as playing guard. DeCastro, I think he's still in the prime of his career, so they're not going to move on from him. But they do have three young candidates in Banner, Okorafor, and Dotson. So if you're looking, I think when people say you gotta rebuild the offensive line, I think that they're looking for some definitive moment, like with Pouncey, where they went out and drafted him in the first round back in 2010. But I think this year or this time around, it's happening right before our very eyes, and maybe we don't realize it quite yet because they have such a veteran group as their top five, or at least they did prior to this year. But I think the future of the offensive line is good right now. It looks pretty good based on the three young guys that I mentioned and Matt Feiler. So I don't know if he's going to be your right tackle next year or not, but I think if Zach Banner takes that job again, and I think you can keep Feiler at left guard. As far as Kevin Dotson, I don't know. Maybe he could play left guard. I realize he played right guard all throughout college, and that's where he's played so far in the pros. And it's probably not as easy as we all think, or certainly as I think, to switch from right to left guard or right to left tackle. But I think if you're talented, you're talented. So if they decided they wanted Kevin Dotson to move over to left guard next year, or even this year, if they had to move Matt Feiler to right tackle for some reason, I have a feeling that Dotson would do good in that role. So again, to wrap it all that up, I think their offensive line, the future of the line is looking pretty good as of right now. So that's all I pretty much wanted to cover today. And now I will open things up to some questions to round out the show. So let's see what you got. See if I can find any old ones while I'm waiting. Here's one from Just Me. Is there any talk about Shazier coming back to coach? Not at the moment, but as we've discussed in the past, I can certainly see him doing that because he loves football. He's all about football, and you saw how long he hung in there trying to recover from his spinal injury that he suffered back in 2017. So I can certainly see that being in his future. I think Tomlin mentioned something during training camp about him having some other things he wants to take care of in his life right now. But I can certainly see him coming back to coach at some point, whether it's with Pittsburgh or somewhere else. When you love the game as much as he does, and he did when he played with such passion. I can definitely see him coaching in the future at some point. Here's one from Nathaniel Karate. Do you think we draft O-line in first round the next 2 years? Not necessarily, no. And it's because of the things I just mentioned. I think I could sort of put a bow on that now. I kind of rambled through that segment, but I could put a bow on it with that question. So I thank you for that, Nathaniel. If Chuks is your starting left tackle, and Zach Banner, if he's your starting right tackle, and Kevin Dotson factors in at one of the guard positions, well, there's three of your linemen, your positions along the line are set. And DeCastro, again, I think is he still has a few years left before he maybe starts winding things down. So I think the only question there is center with Pouncey. How quickly do they want to move on from him? Because he's getting up there in age, and I think it's no secret that his play has declined a little. I still like him. I still love him as a player and as a teammate, a locker room guy, and as a leader on that team. But there's no question that his play has declined a bit in recent years. So I could certainly see them looking at the center position. So if they were to concentrate on one position over the next draft or two, I would say center. But not necessarily in the first round. I mean, you can get a guy in the second or third or fourth round and coach him up, as we've seen with the likes of Mike Munchak and now Sean Cerrett. Let's see here. Here's one from Portna Quinba. What is the plan for the organization post-2021? Colbert is year to year, and Tomlin and Ben's contracts are only through 2021. That's a good question. That's $1 million question. I don't know. I mean, if Ben keeps looking the way he does, if he keeps playing at the same level that he's shown the first 2 weeks, he's talked about wanting to play a few more years beyond 2021. So it just depends on how much he's willing to, how much they're willing to pay him. Is he going to continue to want top dollar? And if he is going to want that kind of money, 35, 40 million a year, are they going to be willing to pay him? I don't know, because as I've said, they have a lot of big decisions to make with their roster, with the likes of T.J. Watt, Juju, Minka Fitzpatrick. It feels like I say this every week, but it's the truth. I mean, this all goes hand in hand with their roster over the next few years. It's a lot of big decisions. So are they going to want to continue to pay a 40-year-old quarterback 35, 40 million a year? Is he going to be willing to take a hometown discount, which he hasn't shown yet up to this point? He's probably made more money than just about any quarterback who's ever played, I think. So I don't know. As far as Tomlin's concerned, the drive is still there, the passion's still there, but as I've said before, Tomlin or Bill Cowher decided enough was enough after 15 years. He wanted to spend more time with his family, and he's never looked back. So maybe Tomlin, he's got a kid in college. I think he has another one who's about to enter college. Maybe he's going to want to be there for them. Maybe, if they win another Super Bowl, that's always the dream of it's always thrown into every conversation about the future, because that's always the dream of every Steeler fan is for them to win another title. If he wins another Super Bowl, he gets to his 15th, 16th year. Maybe he sees that the organization's making changes or moving on. Colbert's retired. Ben's retired. Maybe he decides that he doesn't want to be around for a rebuild, and maybe he decides to go do the family thing. And who knows? I can't picture him being on TV and doing the Bill Cowher thing, but you never know. I didn't picture Bill Cowher doing that back in 2007, and here we are. So I don't know what their plans are. That's a great question. It's something I think if Ben wants to continue to play, I get the feeling they're going to want to keep paying him, but that's just my gut feeling. On the numbers suggest that it might be impossible, but I've thought that before, and they just signed Cam Hayward when I didn't think that was possible. So we'll see. Let's see. Here's one from Ezra, a comment that I skipped over. Here we go. Here it is. Tomlin will coach into his 60s like Marv Levy. Well, he does love his football, so he does seem to be passionate about it. People always wonder about, they always say, what does Tomlin do? I don't understand what he does. Well, what he does better than any coach, I think, and Bill Belichick, is keep his teams together. And you don't do that if your players have stopped listening to your message. If your message has grown stale, then that's a good indication if your players have stopped listening to you, that's a good indication that your message has grown stale. And there's no indication at this point that's been the case. He's never lost his locker room. Last year would have been a great time for that to happen with losing his best player, and they still fought for him and almost made the playoffs. So that's a good comment, Ezra. He's definitely a passionate guy. Here's one from Alex Flores. Who is the key to winning this coming up game on offense and defense? I think the key obviously is this is cliched, but I think you have to slow down Deshaun Watson. You have to keep him in the pocket, because I saw, even though the Ravens had great success against the Texans last week, there were several occasions when Watson escaped the pocket and made plays downfield. And he's got a nice group of veteran receivers, Randall Cobb, Will Fuller, one guy, Brandon Cooks. They're not, none of those guys are number one elite receivers, but they're all really darn good. And if the secondary struggled a bit over the first 2 weeks, you can't do that against those guys, and you can't let if Deshaun Watson gets out of the pocket. Look at Ben Roethlisberger. Look at the success he's always had escaping the pocket. So I think you have to get a good push up front with the likes of Tyson Alualu, who's done great his first 2 weeks, and obviously Cam and Tuitt. You have to get a push up front and sort of force him, sort of keep him in the pocket. You have to collapse the pocket around him and sort of keep him in front of you and hemmed in. So that's the key on off. As far as defense, the key I think is, as I mentioned, Ben's going to probably want to throw 35, 40 times. That's his MO. But I think the key is to be effective running the ball. They weren't really all that effective running the ball last week, other than that last at the end of the game. I think you have to be more effective in the 15 or 20 times that they do run the ball tomorrow on Sunday. The Texans have the worst rushing defense in the NFL through 2 weeks. So I think that's the key is James Conner's probably the key on offense, and that defensive line's the key on defense. So that's pretty much all I have for today. And I thank you guys for joining me. I thank you guys for the questions, and I thank you out there in podcasting land for listening. So enjoy tomorrow's game. Go Steelers, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So long, everybody.